Welcome back, everyone, to yet again another episode of Op Watch. This week, CF Montreal is headed to Orlando City, to the Sunshine State, and they are facing, like as previously said, Orlando City FC. With us from the Loud and Proud podcast down there is John Rawlins. John, thank you so much for stopping by. How you doing?
Thank you for having me, Elias. Always happy to talk Orlando City.
Yeah, always happy to talk. I mean, you know what? CF Montreal and Orlando City have developed something of a contentious relationship over the last couple of years. I think that's putting it diplomatically. So yeah, I always as a fan of soccer, first and foremost, I always enjoy to see the two teams play against each other because I don't know, it brings something out in both groups.
Yeah, I mean, we have an exact record is
Hmm.
equal, 10 wins each and 6 draws. So, you know, um, I feel like there's always something happening, whether it's a good game or a bad game. It definitely feels like there's a competitive game out on the field, right?
Oh yeah, it's never a
Um,
dull moment. God forbid,
yeah,
you
it's
know.
not always the cleanest between our two teams, but you can see the passion.
Yeah. Um, let's take a look at the return leg first, before we dive into how you guys have been, and take a look at obviously the main reason we're here, which is this Saturday. 0-0 draw, one of Montreal's first points this of the season. um when you guys came to Montreal, what was your takeaway from that? And how has the team maybe grown from that point since, and what can Montreal expect to be different from Orlando City since that time?
I think it was very strange when we came to play you guys. We were in this weird patch where we actually had 4 games in a row that were 0-0. Like I've never seen that in my, all of my years of soccer fandom. So that was a very strange time for us where we just weren't conceding, but we weren't able to score. And a game against you, I think, was the perfect definition of that. Like I don't think you guys really had enough quality, and we even went down a man, and nothing really happened. It just kind of felt like we weren't able to put the ball in the back of the net for that period of time. We've come out of that the other side, and we definitely are a team that's able to score, and we consider ourselves one of the better teams in the East, but
Hmm.
recently it's been difficult. We're struggling up here, fighting, trying to stay in the top four. And there's so many good teams in the East that it's hard to be one of the best, but we are trying to be that.
Well, I mean, speaking of which, right, since then, you guys seem to have kicked it up a notch. One of the best, like you said, right? One of the top teams in the East, and the top third at least, which is I think which most teams aspire to, in contention to host a playoff game. But not just that, you've got the combination of Mario Pasalic, I think. I don't know if I'm butchering that. Pasalic and Martin
Nope,
Ojeda,
you
who
got
have
that right.
been, lights out this year. Talk to me a bit about that combination and how that's, coming to fruition.
I mean, Mario Pasalic, a guy that no one really knew about. Our GM went over to Croatia and pulled a guy that had been in the Borussia Dortmund youth academy and just never really gotten through there. But now you see when he comes to Orlando City, the finished product in a lot of
Mhm.
ways. He is, he says my left foot is my weapon, and it definitely is. So I was biggest piece of advice to you is don't let Marco Paslic get on to his left foot because he will punish you. And Martin Ojeda is a guy that really kind of took a few years to grow into this league, and one that often I think was kind of overshadowed a little bit by Fakutaras. And Fakutaras left at the beginning of the year, and Martin Ojeda became our, main creative number 10
Mhm.
and the guy that everything flows around. And it kind of unlocked a lot for him in that position. And at times he's been up there in the golden boot race, as one of the league leaders so far. So he's definitely producing, and Marco too. The two of them, top DPs that we hope will continue to produce as the rest of the season goes on.
Yeah, I mean, the third member of that, again, not to be ignored, is Luis Muriel, who I think it feels like he had a bit of a slow start to life in MLS. It took him a while, but again, he's got still a modest goal tally. He's got 10 goal contributions, which is nothing to turn your nose up at in MLS at his age. How is he fitting in this season? And you know. at what point, if it's even possible, you think, will we get to see maybe the best of Luis Muriel?
I think last year, Luis Muriel really underestimated what it was going to be in MLS. You know, that
Mm,
classic, I'm coming from Europe and I think it's going to
yeah.
be easy. And he really looked slow and sluggish. And you know, I, for one, and many other people were saying, is he really worth it for another year? And then the beginning of this season, I think something clicked where he realized he had to step it up, and we've seen a much improved Muriel. He's, you know, not an incredible striker. I think he has his moments, but he needs to produce a little bit more. Recently, it's kind of fallen off. The beginning of the season, he did look like, you know, the Muriel that we hoped we'd signed, a guy that scored a lot of goals for Colombia and a lot of goals in Europe. And now, not so much, but he can come back. I think at his age,
Mhm.
he's just not, you know, made to play every game. So it's
Yeah.
about his moments and when we do play him, and he's not the most mobile of players. So a lot of the time, he's the guy who will make beautiful little touches off to the next player, or he'll, you know, make a really smart, intelligent pass, or you know, shoot from distance. He's that kind of guy. Let the other players run around, and he can be out there with a bit of class and quality.
Yeah, I think honestly, you know, say what you want about MLS, but there's very few designated players and top players from Europe that can come to MLS and succeed without first having to learn to respect the league, at least respect the level of football. And again, you saw at the Club World Cup, we're not pretending to be Premier League or La Liga or anything like that. But there is a certain amount of seriousness that needs to be taken. Not everyone could just be Messi and you know win an MVP as if it were a stroll in the park. And I think the sooner a designated player realizes that and kind of hunkers down, the better. Because sometimes you get examples again. Anyone from Montreal will never tire of telling of throwing the Lorenzo Insigne example out there. But it's just someone who shows up, does not respect what is required to be successful in MLS, and just doesn't really get anywhere with it. So I think that even if you do get a year to scoff at it and then realize, oh shit, maybe I got to try a little bit. It's always nice when designated players come around and actually start, because it also improves the game and improves the reputation of MLS, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
But
we had a real
yeah,
fear that that was not going to be the case. So it is encouraging that
you really
Muriel
can't tell,
has
man. Yeah.
he's figured it out this year. You know, he's having a gas theorem year. He was touted as David's gas player to be gas theorem this year, and it's working out. So there you go.
Well, let's look on the other side of the ball. And again, it's if you look at everything through a Sea of Montreal lens, it's phenomenal, right? But 20 goals conceded is fairly middle of the pack. Nothing terrible, but it's obviously not Philadelphia or NYCFC this year, who have been excellent defensively. Um, how's the back line? How's the defensive structure of the team looking? And where is there any cause for concern, or where is there any cause to go, okay, this is really interesting?
Interesting for you guys is we have two key suspensions. They're going to come into play. So a yellow card accumulation for both Pedro Galese and Robin Janssen, our main center back, and of course, longtime goalkeeper. So you're going to have Javier Otero in goal, who is our backup Venezuelan OCB goalkeeper, and then probably a combination of Rodrigo Schlegel and David Brecalo, who has been
Okay.
playing left back, but I imagine he's going to move to center back, which is his natural position. And then either Rafa Santos, who is, in my opinion, our biggest liability, if he gets on the field. So that will be good for you. Or maybe Kyle Smith, who is kind of our utility guy who can play anywhere in that left back position. So I think that's important that you guys are going to be playing a team that has two key pieces in our back line missing, especially leadership wise. I mean, Jansen is our
Mhm.
captain,
Yeah.
and Pedro Galese is an important leader on that back line as well. So it's going to be interesting what wrinkles that changes. I think our back line is still, you know, Oscar Pereira drills this team year in, year out to be very tough to beat, especially at home. We'd like to pride ourselves on our home record, but it's not been really convincing. We have made some errors recently, like Cincy. Both of their goals were from errors that we kind of conceded. So hopefully we can have a clean game against Montreal. And I'm sure you hear this a lot, but we consider this a big trap game.
Yeah, everyone says that, and it almost never actually ends up being a trap. So I've learned to
I'm
take that with
sorry,
a grain of
Elias.
salt.
Maybe,
I mean,
maybe it will.
Houston had the same concern, and then Montreal went in and had their best game of the season and won 3-1. So it does carry some weight.
Yeah,
But I see all these teams go like, yeah, you can never know what, and everyone's like, it's a learned cynicism, to be fair,
it's an
but it's
overused
also
term, probably as
it's,
well.
well, it's because MLS, there's obviously a gulf between teams, and there's gulfs in quality, but there's no such thing as an easy game in MLS. Even against a team like Montreal, like Toronto, like LA Galaxy, it doesn't mean you're going to walk in. I mean, sometimes you will win comfortably, but doesn't mean it's not a given. So I understand why teams are concerned that it could be trap games, but Montreal fans are so sick of hearing that term because it's like it
I'm
never
sure
ends up,
you are.
the trap is never triggered. So on that note, let's kind of pivot towards the reason we're here, this game on Saturday. um you mentioned the concern, or whether to varying degrees, of this trap game. It's sometimes when that concern is there, it's symptomatic of something that's happened for the team all season, right? And when we spoke to people from Houston, they had this was not the first time that they had lost relatively easy points. And I was wondering, you guys again have had a fairly consistent record at home. What's your mentality going into a game like this?
I mean, for us, I another overused phrase, but it's very true in this case is must-win game, and this
Hmm.
is a must-win game in very many ways because of where we are in the table, how competitive the top of the East is. Miami have already leapfrogged us with all of their games in hand that they have remaining. We are, you know, I don't want to use the word desperate, but we are very eager to remain in the top four, or near the top four and not, fall down the pack. I think if you get lower into those playoff places, into the New Yorks and your Charlottes, there's dangers of dropping out of the playoffs. And so for us, a home game against, Montreal, who are bottom of the table, kind of in this moment is seen as a must win.
Hmm.
The reason for that being just because our last two results haven't necessarily gone the way we wanted. A home loss to Cincinnati. I mean, I'm sure no one's sniffing at that. That's a
What happened
respectable
in
thing to
Montreal
happen.
last week? So
And but the
common.
draw away at Charlotte was one that we really didn't. We thought we'd be able to go there and get a result. We did come back from 2 goals down, but to concede 2 goals to a team that Charlotte's ability in their attack this year was very
Hmm.
disappointing, but we did show some fight and come back from that. We haven't played a home game in a while. The fans are eager to see us score multiple goals and enjoy a nice home game. So I think if we were to lose this one, even if we were to draw this one, I think a lot of our fans would be very disappointed. And I think our hopes of being a top team in the East would definitely slip a lot more if we were to lose to you guys at home on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, it's always so competitive, but at the same time, I feel like once it gets down into like, do or die time, every team in the MLS just forgets how to play soccer. It's so weird. And everyone's like, no, 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 you go ahead. No, you go ahead. It makes absolutely no sense. But I do get that concern. That's obviously something you gotta kind of, it's again, it's never free points, but it's points that you should in theory be getting. We mentioned no Robin Jansen, no Pedro Galese, but besides the back line, where in terms of whether it's a section of play, or somewhere on the pitch, or a specific matchup, are you most concerned uh, about this matchup with Montreal? And on the other hand, where are you looking at this Montreal team and saying this part of the field we need to dominate, and we need to really, this is where the win will come from if we get it?
Yeah, I think from our side, it's left back. Like I said, or
Mhm.
if Rafa Santos is chosen to go in, he's been a bit of a liability this year. It's quite easy to go past him.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think about who your opposite number would be on your right wing
Probably
there.
Caden Clark on the left.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of
Um,
time for Caden Clark, man. I think definitely one of your better players. So that could be an interesting matchup. And I think on your side as well, like I'm always wary of Owusu, not because I think he's an incredible striker. I just think he's the kind of guy that causes us problems just by being,
yeah.
big and frustrating and up there. And a
I
lot
mean,
of the
6 goals in
time,
his last 5 games in all competitions, so he's
so
finally starting to
he's picking
get
it
some
up. Yeah.
confidence. Yeah.
He, he's a guy that if, when he's on can be dangerous just purely
Mhm,
based on his size. And I think often our center backs have difficulty dealing with balls coming into the box. And I know you guys like to play in those, wide balls, get headers into the box. So that would be a concern. Um, and also looking at your team, I think an interesting matchup for us and somebody we know well is going to be Marco Pasalic versus Luca Petrasso,
yeah.
a guy that always loved Luca, a great dude, got a lot of time for him, but he's not a good left back. Sounds harsh, but really in this league and MLS standards, I think Luca, versus Marco, I think Marco is probably going to win that matchup most of
Mhm,
the time. And also, I don't know if he's going to start, but if Alex Freeman is on the field, he will fly up that right side and cause overlaps and real problems down your left hand side as well with Marco Pasalic. The two
mhm.
of them have a great partnership.
Yeah, I mean, in all fairness, Luca Petrasso has been not I won't say a revelation, but he's definitely been a pleasant surprise. I don't think anyone had any crazy expectations about him when he came in. He came in as a trialist. He was, in terms of salary wise, it was negligible. And damn it, if he's not one of the hardest workers on the field. He does have
100%.
he does
Good
have a
dude.
hard time dealing with again, like you mentioned, very skilled left-footed players who like to cut in on their left foot. It's not to say like the book is out on him and that's his weakness, but other players in the I mean Messi, it's kind of unfair to say that about him because it's Messi, but even someone like Federico Bernardeschi had his way with him when Montreal and Toronto played. So, when
Yeah.
he gets isolated on his own defensively, he does have a hard time, but we got to give credit where credit is due. This season, Luca Petrasso has been one of the most consistent players. And again, huge surprise. I don't think anyone saw that coming, but he's
That
turned
makes me
into a
very happy
fairly
to hear that.
reliable left back.
Yeah, I'm gonna be really happy to hear that because as much as it might have sounded like I slated the guy, I'm just being honest about my opinions of his
I mean,
sporting ability as a person and as who he was, and the way he represented his club. I really, really thought Luca was a stand-up guy, and so
mhm.
I'm happy that he's showing that he can contribute to a team and is being found somewhere in Montreal that it works for him. That's great.
Yeah, he's also a great interview. He's probably one of my favorite people. When there's a media availability, he's actually going to be available to
Super
media
nice.
tomorrow, so I'm excited for that. But he's super nice guy, and for a guy that come from TFC, he is super happy to be in Montreal. And again, it's the easiest way to win over Montreal fans is to kind of do
I
that.
think the loan that he went out on to, I can't remember the name of the club, but he went out to a Series C side when he was with
Yeah,
us out on
I don't
loan,
remember.
and
Yeah.
he came back, he looked like a different player, and I think we didn't really give him a chance, but maybe now that's working out.
I mean, he's still a young guy. I think he's what 21 or 22. So hopefully he can continue. But I mean, I completely understand Orlando's take on him, given the how he got to Montreal. It wasn't exactly you had to spend a bunch of gam and you had to actively chase him. You had to kind of just there for the taking. But yeah, I still think it's going to be a very difficult matchup because like I previously mentioned, when he's all alone and he gets caught in an overlap, it gets very complicated for him. He has a hard time handling any kind of outnumber situation, so or any kind of overload. So I think that'll probably be where Montreal gets hurt the most. Another spot obviously is center back. Joel Waterman is now back. George Campbell is in the form of his life, but you know Joel Waterman hasn't played with the team in over a month at this point. George Campbell's still coming back from injury. We don't really know. There's still a whole lot of unknowns. Jalen Neal is obviously still injured, but I think it's going to be very touch and go defensively, given that they've conceded like 15 goals in the last 4 games or something. So, you know, you always
Piet
watch
is
like, through your fingers.
I was gonna say Piet is the other one that we always there's always something going on between Orlando City players and Piet. Like he gets under our skin. I don't know if it's Cesar. I remember there was some beef with him and Piet in the
Yeah.
past, but they seem to bang heads quite often.
Yeah, he's like he's always a stand-up guy. He's super professional. He's one of those like classic. He still tucks his shirt into his shorts. That kind of classic defensive midfielder. But
True Frenchman.
if he gets hot, he's gonna get in your face. Him and Joel Waterman, actually. I remember Joel Waterman got in a couple people's faces in the last times they played.
Yeah, that I remember
We won't
Waterman.
get
The
into
crowd
the
did not like
preseason
him.
kerfuffle that happened. Apparently, we don't have any footage of that, but I'm sure it was par for the course. But yeah, again, Summer Piet, who's also coming back from a pretty from a pierced eardrum, actually, or from an eardrum injury. So he's only played 45 minutes the last 2 games. It'll be really interesting. But before we let you go, before we end this, we always like to hear predictions. So score prediction. What's it going to be?
I said on our podcasts earlier in the week that it's going to be a 2-0, and I think I'm going to go with that. Yeah, we're not firing on all cylinders at the moment. Like we do have a
Mhm.
very good attack, but it's not always as clinical as it can be. But I do think our back line has enough about us to keep you guys out for this game. So I'm hopeful for a clean sheet and a couple of goals. It could be more. I think it depends. If we find our shooting boots early on, it could get high, 4 or 5 even. We've had those games against lower teams that have come to town.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards a 3-1 for similar reasons. We talked about, the people you're missing, including Pedro Galicia, who seems to turn into, Manuel Neuer whenever he plays Montreal. But I feel like Prince Usu's got to get his customary one at this point. The last month and a half, it feels like even if he doesn't have a good game, he gets a goal. Which is literally what happened against Miami. He had a terrible game, but he got his goal. So I think it's going to be one of those. But yeah, I think that honestly, this is the worst point in the season for Montreal. They just got knocked out of the Canadian Championship by a Canadian Premier League team. They've won 1 game of their last God knows how many at this point. It's too far to count. I'm leaning towards 3-1. I think that's a reasonable scoreline without insulting too many people. But yeah, I don't think it's going to get much better than that for Montreal.
My co-host Luis said 3-1, so he's with you.
We're thinking alike. John, thank you so much for coming by. I really appreciate you taking the time. Um, Let the good people of Montreal and of Canada know what you've got going on, where they can find you, and all the cool stuff you're doing.
Well, if you're interested in Orlando City, I don't know why you would be as someone who lives in Montreal, but you can be, and we would love for you to check us out.
We
It's
got a lot of snowbirds, right? Maybe they're interested.
Yeah, please come on down, check it out when you're, off for the winter. It's beautiful down here in the winter. You can find us at Loud and Proud Orlando. We are on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, all those places, Spotify, Apple Music. We make podcasts every week about Orlando City, but we also cover Orlando Pride, which is the NWSL champions from last year, as well as lots of other things. I am just about to launch another podcast as well. So stay tuned for that. So check us out on social media, Loud and Proud Orlando.
Awesome. Again, John, thank you so much for taking the time. And as always, may the best team win.
Thank you, Elias.